Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
Katie, it doesn't feel like fall, but I know it is almost fall because all we're doing is talking about fall marathons with our athletes.
I know, it happens so quickly. I feel like we're like triathlon. And then before we know it, there are 0 triathlons on the books. Maybe a couple people kind of doing that final fall sprint or Olympic, whatever it is. But then everyone's kind of switching into run season. So we've got marathons, we've got half marathons, we've got some trail races, things like that. But I would say marathons are by and large the biggest thing that we're seeing. And we've talked about it before, but this is the hard time of year where you're doing long runs to prep for a marathon and it's summer, which makes things really, really challenging. We've talked about that before, but I think our focus today is going to be largely on kind of the key principles that we are talking to our athletes about for prepping for these fall races. And that's really what I am seeing in Training Peaks for the most part. Jim, you've written down some really, really helpful things here. So maybe we'll just jump right in with starting there.
Yeah, I sort of did this. I did the notes. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Maybe we'll get to most of it. But I'm just kind of curious because, first of all, I wanted to write a bunch of stuff out because I've been talking about this all the time. It's like, okay, what am I talking about? Make sure I'm hitting all the main points. But mostly I just wanted to talk about this today because I know, Katie, you're a really good marathon runner. You have a lot of experience with marathon training. And so I was like, okay, let me write out what I've been saying to my athletes, but I kind of want to get Katie's feedback. I'm like, am I covering everything myself? So I feel like this is a little bit of selfish podcast because I want to pick your brain as well. So anyway, let's start here. I have been talking about with my athletes, like this concept, like sort of building this brick wall, right? Building this foundation, sort of the weekly structure for a fall marathon. And so what I'm talking about is like, there's this bricks and there's this mortar. And then the bricks are really this like the tempo and the speed work and the long run. And those are sort of the bricks, like the main building blocks of the week. And these are sort of the key sessions. But also there's the mortar, which is like the short, frequent, easy runs. And like the mortar is like the pace that puts it all together. And you kind of need both. You need the bricks and you need the mortar because the mortar is what adds sort of the substance and keeps it all together for the week. And so I think they're both really critical and I think they both make you each stronger. And I think we're going to kind of go through like some, how we build out the weekly structure. But Katie, sort of just in general, how are you thinking about like structuring like fall marathon plans on a weekly, sort of a monthly basis?
Yep, I totally agree. I think just like you said, that key midweek speed session and then the long run are kind of the key workouts. And for most athletes, like even sort of athletes who are just getting into this for the first time, there is going to be some level of intensity in these long runs. So maybe that's something that's a little bit different from when we're building out a tri plan. Usually I'm giving people like one kind of key speed session in a week and then they'll have a little bit of speed in a run off the bike, but it's not the same as these long runs that are actually really, really beefy. So you might go out and do a 20-mile long run at some point that's like a 4:3:2:1 miles at marathon pace, for example, or you kind of like the biggest marathon workout could have up to maybe even 15 miles that are at sort of near that marathon goal pace. So you have to think about those runs as really the meat of the week, where otherwise in a triathlon plan, it's just kind of like that volume. Like we need to get the volume no matter what. I am very rarely giving, say, an Ironman athlete a 20-miler with a bunch of pace work because, again,
right.
Ironman marathon is a very different sport from standalone marathon. And it's interesting because standalone marathon is really like a tempo into threshold effort, which is interesting. Like in Ironman, you have to be able to just grind at high zone 2 forever and ever and ever, a little bit of tempo. But this is a hard and sort of somewhat power-based event, especially in the very kind of final miles, making sure your body doesn't break down, making sure you don't hit the wall, pulling together all the fueling and all the other stuff to make that happen. So I totally agree. Like we can't understate the importance of that long run and the work that comes with it, as well as the speed during the week. And then if you just have those two, we're not really hitting this 80-20 distribution. So in order to hit 80-20, we also need really good supporting easy aerobic work. And maybe we'll talk about this later is, yes, I think you want to hit frequency. Yes, I think you want easy runs. I am a huge fan of flexing and cross training when we can to substitute for junk volume, just because I think my biggest focus with marathon training is keeping people injury free. And sometimes when we have just too much running in there and when people can't keep it honest with being easy, that's where we really see running injury risk go up. So in a perfect world, yes, we're running a lot. However, with all the constraints on people's time, is the strength training good? All of that. That's where I usually like to pull in a little bit more cross training.
Boy, there's a lot there, Katie.
I did
Wow.
not plan that either, but it's been sitting in my brain because I'm doing it for so many athletes right now. So,
Well, that's why we're talking about it today, because I'm I'm just trying to pull it all apart a little bit and say, okay, what am I really talking about? Because it just seems there's so many. When I write something down, I'm like, oh, and there's that, and then there's that, and then there's that, but then there's that. So you're creating all these just different decision trees, and we're going to go through some of that as well too. But something I don't have in my notes, and just kind of curious of how you handle it, is we have a lot of athletes who are coming from triathlon and then they're going into marathons. And as we know, like the running paces are or can be very, very different between just exactly what you said. Like I'm running an Ironman, and if you're running an Ironman, you're running, a 9-minute pace at an Ironman, like you're blazing, you're doing good. But a lot of people probably can run faster than their Ironman pace, obviously, for a standalone marathon. So how do you sort of think about that? How do you prep somebody to say, okay, you've been doing triathlon runs. Do you do a speed test? Do you do say, hey, go run a 5K? Like, how do you recalibrate that speed? Because it really is a recalibration, I think, of sort of thresholdy type speed that's then maybe sets their marathon pace. But how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to an intersection of factors. One of those is the athlete's goal time, for example. So a lot of people do a fall marathon with some goal like, I want to break 4 hours, 3.5 hours. I want to say qualify for Boston, and the timing for that is going to be a little bit based on what the age group qualification is there, minus about 6 minutes to prepare for the fact that so many people qualify. So there's different times that sort of float out there. We do often have to do a little bit of a reality check whether, your fitness is there to maybe have a shot at hitting that pace at the beginning of your season. I think there is a lot of improvement that can happen in one given season, but sometimes you have to think about this project. Let's say you're qualifying for Boston as a multi-year project. But basically, usually we start with a conversation about what is your goal. And then we look at the paces for that. And sometimes it's really, really hard if you've never done a marathon before to have a goal time, but actually know what that feels like. Maybe the longest you've ever run is 13 miles or something. And then you're like, well, my goal time is this, but I have no idea if my body can sustain that. I do find that a useful tool for this is the VDOT chart online, which we've talked about. It's the Jack Daniels VDOT. Basically, you put in a time, you put in a goal time for any race or a time that you have done or can do. And it gives you this breakdown of sort of estimated 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon. Now, it doesn't always scale perfectly for everyone. There are some people who are very fast power based who might be able to hit that 5K time, but would absolutely fall apart if they were to do marathon. On the other hand, there might be some endurance powerhouses who can hit that marathon time, but actually can't go that much faster for a 5K. So again, this is sort of assuming a lot of things that we can't always assume. However, I think it's the very best way to say, do we have a shot at what we're talking about here?
Yep.
And then, for example, let's say your 5K, 10K time, you've raced quite a bit of that before. I think also 5K and 10K, particularly 10K off Olympic, that's where sometimes I think we can see times that are not that far off what you could do standalone. It's usually a matter of a couple minutes or something, but comparing triathlon to, just regular running. But anyway, let's say you have those times, you put them in, and then we look at that projected marathon time. I think that counts as ballpark, and that's something that we can shoot for. Then that sort of features in the athlete's mind of okay, when I'm doing marathon pace work, that's where maybe I can target, or that's what I could try to do potentially. I don't think it's that useful. Let's say we're way off this estimate, there's no chance we could get there based on what we're doing, 5K, 10K, or whatever. Then I would think about, let's maybe set a little bit of a more reasonable goal. You can set any goal you want. You do also have to have some level of baseline fitness to strike at that goal. But that, I'm just sort of describing how it's a really organic process of we have this time and then we feel it out early on in some marathon pace workouts. The first marathon pace workouts that I'll do with an athlete are honestly maybe 4 miles at marathon pace, something like that. And it might feel really hard at first. That's okay. But it's sort of an iterative process where with each subsequent workout, we're seeing how is that pace feeling? What were the conditions? Was it really hot? Was it actually a nice day that replicates what we might see in this race context? And then as we're getting more and more kind of data and feel together, we're zeroing in on what we think is a realistic goal time. And I will say it is very rare that, you are completely surprised by what happens on race day. My goal is that you're not going to be that surprised. We know the ballpark of what's probably going to happen. We can't control it when random sideways things happen with respect to weather, with respect to nutrition imploding to an extent. We're going to practice that for sure. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to have practiced enough that, we have some bounds of what we're going to expect on an A, B, and C day, and probably will fall somewhere in that distribution based on this iterative process that for me often starts with the Jack Daniels VDOT chart. And we can link that also in the show notes. But Jim, actually, you were the one who first introduced me to that. So I'm curious, are you using that or thinking about that anymore kind of as you're prepping people for runs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So so again, so much there I want to pull apart, but yeah, I really like the Jack Daniels VW, just mostly for the fact that it's a big chart and you can look at it and say, okay, maybe I ran my 10K in 8-minute pace, but then you start looking at the chart and saying, well, what if it was like an 8:05 or 8:10, and then you can go across to the marathon place. You can sort of scale yourself up and down as an athlete and say, I don't think maybe I can do, like most athletes have some inclination of what they maybe can maintain for 26 miles, but they can sort of say, okay, well, I'm at 8 here, but I did, what if I did 8:15? Okay, what does that equal over to my? So I think it's a very handy chart. We talked about this, giving yourself a range. And I think one of the things that's really hard about marathoning is that almost everybody comes into a marathon with a specific time that they want to hit, a very goal. Like I have very few people who say, I want to run a marathon and just finish. And it does happen. But I think, we deal with a lot of people who are just maybe getting into triathlon, which is really hard, multifactorial. There's so many skills to learn. It takes a couple of years sometimes to wrap your head around, like, what is this swim, bike, run thing? So a lot of times people just come into the sport and they say, I just kind of want to finish, whether that's, I want to finish a sprint or I want to finish a half or an Ironman, whatever it is. Like, just kind of want to just finish. And a lot of people don't have very specific times. Whereas when you do a marathon, it's like, oh my gosh, like I decided, like it's funny because that same athlete who was determined to just finish an event talks about a marathon and they say, I want to do it in this specific time. You're like, okay, that's a whole different take. Like that's a different athlete. Like you've never talked like that before. So anyway, I think this is kind of interesting because I think this is where coaching really excels, as opposed to say like using an AI or just like a general plan. Like, and I think there's a time and place for some of that stuff. And so I'm not here to trash, just buying a plan or following, I don't know, a runner or something. But exactly what you talked about, Katie, which is this back and forth. Like, you have somebody go out and you run maybe 2 miles the first time at marathon pace of their first long run. And then you say, hey, how'd that feel? And then they say, oh, that felt pretty good. That felt hard. So you're adjusting in the background and you're helping them calibrate through the whole thing. So hopefully you have at least sort of 12 weeks to get ready for this marathon and you're constantly working back and forth and asking questions and you're getting feedback and you guys are both working together to figure out, okay, what is that sustainable pace? Exactly what you said. Like we want to get to race day and it's just execution. There shouldn't really be that many surprises on race day for any of these events, right? So that's where I think the coach and the athlete relationship really is very beneficial and it takes a lot of just back and forth. And sometimes it's listening to people's words. Sometimes it's watching people's body language on a Zoom and they may say something and you go, you pick up on something, you go, you said that, but I'm sensing something else is different there than that, what you're saying. So anyway, I find that very curious that there's a lot going on with this marathon thing.
And I think something else that I'd love to get into is as a coach and in terms of what I want athletes to know about prepping for a marathon is like, yes, the running is important. The workouts are important. But for whatever reason, maybe with volume, maybe with pounding, maybe with pavement, particularly on these road races, injury risk is so high or the risk of getting into that danger zone is so high relative to triathlon that I spend most of my time sort of tweaking things in a way that we can just keep people as injury free as possible. Like that's often my biggest goal. Like, yes, of course I want you to hit your time goals and things like that. But I've almost never really had athletes get injured while training for triathlon, and occasionally there are injuries with run training. And so I think for me, it's a lot of toggling, like where's the fueling at? Where are the surfaces at? Do you have new shoes? Are you doing heavy weighted strength training with lateral movements? Like all these other things that don't get a lot of press in the marathon world because everyone's just like mileage, speed, tempo, whatever. Like, yeah, that's all important. But my goal is that you can actually show up at that starting line. And yes, we're going to build fitness in the process for sure. But I think that's also the value of the coach. Like a lot of these online plans are not reminding you things like, you need to be replacing your shoes. What is your gait like? What are these niggles that are just plaguing you throughout the season, et cetera? Where's your fueling, et cetera? So I think all of that, we could probably talk about each of those things, but everyone should just know that that's as important as hitting the mileage, the workouts, et cetera, is thinking about all these different levers that we can pull that can help us avoid injury and knowing that inherently because of the pounding and because of the mileage, there is higher injury risk with high volume running.
Yeah. So speaking of injury, I think what's interesting is that, we start to say, well, what's appropriate? And start looking at, okay, we're going to do a marathon block. And I'll start looking at, maybe it's a new athlete and I'll have to say, okay, look back and hopefully they have some data for context. Maybe it's an athlete I've been working with for a long time, but I have an example here I wrote out, which is like, okay, a standard thing is like a 2-minute interval, right? For some speed work on Tuesdays, right? The very classic thing, like let's just do some speed work on Tuesdays. And so where do you start? the athlete, right? Because it's very, very, very different. For example, like a 2 minutes on a track on, running say 400 or something, like is way, way, way different than say even just running a 5K pace, right? So, really fast, right? And you're sort of doing it at a level of maybe that 5 minute effort level. But then you look at like a 5K pace, that's more of a 20-minute effort level. And again, sort of working the way down the road. A 2 minute interval at 10K is at a 40, maybe to 50-minute effort level. And 2 minute intervals on a 15K pace is more like an hour effort level. So those are extremely different. So you look at it and go, okay, yeah, 2 minute interval session, let's go. And suddenly it's like, okay, wait, I'm on a track, it's flat, I'm trying to do them really quickly. Or maybe it's 10K pace, which is with a slight incline. Those are very, very wildly different loads on the body. And as coaches, we have to figure out, okay, what's the most appropriate thing? Is it the track for this athlete? Some people it is. They can just get right from their training right to the track. Or you say, you know what? We haven't done that much fast running. Let's do some 10K pace up an incline. What do you got? What terrain do you have around you? Can you do that? And start there. And maybe then you work them down to 5K or something. But again, there's just all this back and forth. Like you say, Katie, like our first number one job is do no harm, right? Keep people healthy, keep them consistent, because consistency really, in the long run, that's what gets us our goals.
Totally. And it can be sort of a slow process to kind of work through these different levels of speed work. But I find that often people are new-ish to structured speed work, especially if they're newer to marathon. And so therefore, we can really start with like, hey, we're just going to do 10K pace intervals. We might just do like 6x1:1 at 10K pace, which is the effort that you could hold for, again, like 40 to 50 minutes. That's not super, super, super hard. But if you haven't been doing any structured speed work, that's a pretty big deal. And once we've unlocked that, we might go from 6x1:1s to 8x1:1s to 10x1:1s. Then it's 5K pace, then we can move into something that's on a track, etc. And so as we're sort of building through those levels, you are building fitness and you're building your body's exposure to this type of stimulus. But just know that there are going to be different levels to get there. We can't jump right into these like big, sexy workouts that you see people do. That's often, I think, the too much, too fast, too soon, while we are seeing kind of injury and breakdown and everything. And I think this actually applies to the long run as well. Maybe let's talk a little bit about like if we're starting a plan for someone or we're training them for the first time, how we might think about setting the distance of a long run. Context can be so specific here. And again, a lot of these plans that you download online, they're like, okay, first long run, 12 miles. Some people are not prepared to run 12 miles. I personally am barely prepared to run 12 miles on the road tomorrow. I haven't done that in a little while. And so what questions are you asking maybe if you want to set that first long run and then build someone through a plan? And then keeping in mind too that the distance of that first long run, it's going to be an easy mileage long run, is going to sort of dictate where the rest of the plan goes. Like, are we going to have 3 20-milers or just 1 20-miler? How many weeks do we have, et cetera? How far backwards are we working? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, good questions. Again, like if it's a new athlete trying to get as much information as possible, hopefully it's somebody we've been working with looking back and saying, oh yeah, you were training. Okay, so you were training for Ironman. So we did do some longer runs, right? Maybe we did some 2-hour runs, maybe even a 2.5-hour run. We do it by time. And so that athlete obviously is much more prepared for a longer run probably than say an athlete who's been doing short course for the summer too as well too. So again, what's the context here? And again, Katie, as you say, like the AI or the training plans, like it's just, I always say that's like sort of going out, stepping outside your house with a shotgun, shooting up in the air and hoping you hear a turkey, flying over for Thanksgiving. It's a really random event. So yeah, we have to be super careful there. And then again, what's your running history? Do you like running? I mean, is this something you would really embrace? Like, if you hate running, we're probably going to start a lot easier, and shorter than say someone's like, running is my thing. I used to run in high school. I love it. It was my first love. Okay, great. You're up for it, right? You've got some running background this summer. You're totally psyched for it. Maybe we can push up a little bit in terms of time and miles for the long run. So anyway, yeah, it's really like this, everything's in context.
And I think, too, it's important for the athlete to be really honest with where they're at. Like, it's often, like, I've been guilty of this for sure, where I have big goals and big aspirations, and therefore I probably want to start somewhere beyond what my fitness actually is. Or you might be indexing on, like, past season. Let's say you've done plenty of marathons before, or you've done half marathon builds, whatever it is. It's really easy to just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to jump right into that. Like, I feel good. I feel excited. Feeling excited is not the same as feeling fit. And sometimes it's easy. I mess those things up too, for sure. And you have to kind of be honest with where you're at, knowing that fitness is going to ebb and flow throughout a season. I definitely had that feeling like kind of early coming back into running postpartum, like confusing feeling excited with feeling fit and being like, oh, I'm just going to jump in there and do stuff. I think working with a coach to help me hold myself accountable to like, I actually need to do run walk intervals right now, even though I feel really, really excited. But just knowing that your body's going to take a little bit of time to adjust to that load, and slowly but surely is kind of always going to be the best way to get there. And that actually speaks to the importance too of looking at your whole year, your whole season, and working backwards. How much time do I actually need to get into like a beefy marathon plan? I often find that 12 weeks is a beefy marathon plan. So if you're not ready to sort of hit the ground running 12 weeks out, running probably like 10 to 12 miles, then you want to work backwards on the timeline. So maybe we need 16 weeks, maybe we need 20 weeks, maybe we need 24 weeks. Maybe this is a years long project. If you're couch to marathon, it could take a year really to get there in a way that we're going to stay injury free and of course enjoy the process. You don't want to feel rushed, and always building in a little bit of extra time. This is true for Ironman or any really triathlon too, is things will come up. You will get sick, you will have travel, your family will have stuff going on. There will always be things that are going to derail one week or another, and therefore having a little bit of extra time so you don't feel pressed is probably a good call.
Yeah. And I want to circle back to, what's the reality versus, I feel this way. And then you go, okay, what's the reality? And it's interesting. I sort of did this as a sort of a side quest here, and I've sort of been trashing AI a little bit here in this episode, but I want to point out where I think it's been useful, which is, so for example, I just downloaded all my data from all summer training, mostly for biking. And I said, hey, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And I have impressions of what my reality is, but I wanted to get sort of just a data analysis of like, okay, what is objectively, what does the data say? And then luckily it all kind of matched up. And, I said, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? But what's interesting is I have a new athlete coming on board, and she has all her data in Training Peaks for the whole summer. So I had her download from May 1st up to now. And I ran analysis and said, hey, can we talk about, what's the run threshold, FTP? Kind of just give me a broad evaluation of where this athlete's at. And it's put out a lot of interesting discussion points. And again, some of the stuff was off. Some of it maybe, is going to be on. But it was just interesting because there are some discrepancies there between, like, say, what the zones are in Training Peaks and what this athlete thinks that they're at and what the data actually says. So I think that's a place where, data analysis does help. It does it gives us a check, right? Or at least it gives us a discussion point to say, hey, we're seeing this in the data. There may be reasons why to explain, okay, my efficiency factor went down or something just because it's been hot and humid, but there's a discussion there. It's an interesting checkpoint. And again, sort of we as coaches are trying to always touching reality as I'm thinking about, it's like, what's the reality here versus our expectations, our feelings, all this stuff, where we want to be versus where we are right now. And I think sometimes that tool can be super helpful, at least to have that conversation.
And then, of course, when we think about it as a tool, we also have to think about the relevant context that we bring in as coaches. And then as humans, as the athlete, it's like, okay, what was going on in your life? What was the weather? Because sometimes I think that weather stuff is not actually in the Training Peaks data. Like Training Peaks doesn't know if it was Jahi 160, for example, which it's basically been for most workouts that most people have been doing for this whole summer. All of that is where we can bring in a little bit of sort of color to the story that we get from the data. And I think that's really important, especially when we're trying to solidify goals. And I will say, as a coach right now, it's sort of an interesting time to be coaching marathon, and this happens every year. But a lot of people, I'm like, we don't really know your marathon pace yet because every single one of your long runs have been in such hot and humid conditions. Yeah. And I'm like, trust me, it's going to be faster. We don't actually know how much faster, but I think like we will get there. Often when people are like 4, 5, 6 weeks out, hopefully that will be in September, for example, and we're going to start to actually see the cooler days, the cooler mornings, where you can actually get a reality check of where your paces are. But I will say, like, keep some faith that there actually is going to be a little bit of a boost there. The heat and humidity, as we talk about all the time, makes everything a little bit difficult. So again, data helpful, AI a helpful tool some of the time, but generally there's a lot of context that comes in just even from the weather conditions and of course bringing in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so give me pushback on this. One thing I have been pitching a lot of these marathon folks is saying, hey, I want you to try to run 5 times a week. And most of them are already running, at least 3 times a week, and they're already kind of doing the bricks of the wall. In other words, most of them been doing some level of speed, maybe on Tuesday, definitely a long run for sure for a lot of folks. And then there's maybe some middle thing in there where it's easy with some strides, right? So I say, well, you're kind of already there. And what I'm looking to do is just to add a little bit more frequency, because we're always rewarded for frequency in any skill building thing we do, so in sport or anything, or playing the piano, like play it often, do it often. So what I'm saying is, I say, first I'm going to say it's 5 times a week, but don't freak out, because here's the deal. Is like the other 2 ones that maybe you're not doing now are easy 20 to 40 minute, just really easy time on feet. Just get out there and build some efficiency. Again, doing some aerobic base building. And again, Kate, I like your idea of like, cross training. I want to talk more about that is, including some of that stuff as well. But, do you think about frequency for people? How are you approaching, building up enough miles, building enough robustness in people's tendons and muscles to actually survive a 26-mile crucible?
Totally. Okay. So I saw this note on 5 times a week and I was like, I might push back just a little bit. It depends a lot on the athlete. It depends a lot on context. But maybe the nuance here is if you are preparing for a marathon, I want you doing some form of cardio 6 times a week. In my plans, usually 4 of those are runs and then 2 of them are cross training. Again, those could be like durability building. You could be doing incline walk on the treadmill. You could be going for a hike. You could be doing elliptical. You could be doing something on the bike. You could be going for a swim, etc. Like that cross training is something that I can sort of flex based on what people are feeling that given day, what they enjoy, etc. But sometimes I don't see the huge value add of adding like a 5th run instead of one of those cross training sessions, just given the potential injury risk. And I think that comes down to a couple of factors. Number one is that some people still really struggle to keep easy running honest. And so it's like, oh, we've got another sort of medium stimulus in there or something that's just like mid to high zone 2. Whereas if you were on the bike, your average heart rate would be 120. Or if you were on the uphill treadmill, there is a cap on that. And so we're actually getting the zone 1 stuff. I think if you were as advanced of an athlete that you can truly run in zone 1, like no problem, that's where we're talking. Like, yeah, you can probably handle the mileage of that 5th run. Maybe you're running 6 days a week. I think that's doable. But often when athletes are like just sort of scratching the surface of being comfortable in zone 2, and often they float on the border, I'm like, let's actually be sure that we're hitting that lower aerobic stimulus. So that's where I'll put in the cross training a little bit. And the other reason is that usually in my plan, so I've got 4 days of running and then 2 days of cross training. And on the cross training days, I will put in strength. And often if you are also running on a strength day, unless again, it's really easy zone 1, you feel kind of trash for strength. And on those days, actually, strength is your big rock. So I want you to hit strength first and then just get a little bit of like cardio burn after if you can at some point during the day. 30 to 60 minutes, sometimes even 20 minutes is totally fine for that cross training. So I think a lot of it then just comes back to like, what is the intention of each day? The intention of those strength plus cross training days is mostly to get the strength stimulus plus a little bit of extra sort of aerobic base type building. The goals of like the other 2 sort of mid-distance runs are, yes, we have to touch frequency and we want to build durability. Then we've got the speed work, which is sort of like the crown jewel of midweek, and the long run, which is the crown jewel of the weekend. And both of those are going to get you there. So again, it's going to come down to the athlete. But I usually say, unless you are certain that you can run really well in zone 1, low zone 2, I don't think we necessarily need that extra run. And sometimes it's helpful just to like avoid burnout and feeling like, oh, this is too much running. Some people love that. And some people hate it when I suggest cross training, but I always feel like my triathlon background is coming in there where I'm like, it's actually great. You will be super durable if you can do this other stuff. And again, too, I think it's useful because so many of our athletes do like a triathlon season and then into a run season. Not everyone. Maybe we have some just pure runners listening, but it's nice to like touch biking once a week or something such that you're not taking 6 months off biking before your kind of next season. And so if you just keep it in the rotation, that often helps me. I think swimming's interesting. Like I have some athletes who do want to keep a swim in there. That's where I think it's actually better for sort of the recovery stimulus. So if you want to actually build durability, work on tendons, things like that, you might actually think about the hike, the uphill treadmill, maybe some low cadence biking for strength, things like that. Swimming isn't going to do a lot for sort of your running durability, but it serves another purpose. And thinking about, the day after your really hard speed workout, if you're also going to go do some strength, a swim might feel amazing. So that's sort of where we just have like organic flexing of different things in there. But again, unless you really feel confident in your ability to do zone 1, 2 running, that's where I would be hesitant about adding anything that we don't kind of absolutely need, because then it can turn into like junk miles. And maybe a reframe of this entire thing is like, we need 2 sessions in the week that are like zone 1, basically. Zone 1, low zone 2, by any means to get there, sort of. But if you can't do that on running, or if you have any injury risk at all, that's where I'm going to up the cross training.
No, I hear exactly right. I always say to people like, 2 of those are going to be, you're going to run in the morning and then you're going to, in the afternoon, you're going to wonder, oh, did they even run today? But Katie, as you say, and that's a very advanced. It's funny because it takes a long time for people to learn how to go slow, which is really interesting because everybody's all worried about going too slow, and whereas coaches are going like, no, we'd love it if you went slow like a couple times a week or one time a week. And so I think you're really fighting sort of the culture in a lot of ways. Go fast, go long, go fast. But I'll bear that in mind. That's good. Yeah, and I have a lot of cross training, and I think that's sort of an offshoot. I think we'll talk about in future podcasts is sort of like what to do during the off season. And I think one of the things that I'm cognizant of, especially for my triathletes, is that, yeah, like you say, Katie, I don't want them off the bike for 12 weeks. If they want, yeah, sure. If they can't get to the pool, going to the pool is a pain in the ass for a lot of people. Sure, we can dump that. Or you can do it every once in a while as sort of a, economical massage. But I would love it if you're doing some cross training, because I think the mistake I see for folks who want to be in triathlon and they want to do well over a period of years, if we take these really big breaks, like say off the bike, for example, like it's hard. There's a big startup cost sort of the next year. And I think that what we see is that folks who are reaching their goals sooner and just having more fun with the sport are sort of thinking about there's an off season in terms of mental recovery and some physical recovery, but still, how do you keep some consistency with at least 2 out of the 3 sports? And so I try to always encourage some level of at least some biking, for cross training with my triathletes in marathon.
And I'm going to jump in here really quick with sort of a relevant to me story related to this. So I've talked about before, I'm training for a half marathon right now. Again, the principles are actually pretty similar to what I'm talking about with marathon training. But in the context of having an A race that is a half marathon, I talked to my coach about how I also want to preserve the fitness to be able to just kind of throw down at a local tri, like have fun. Again, I'm not training for that as an A race by any means, but I want like enough biking and enough little bit of swimming that I could just show up at a local sprint tri. And I think there is a local sprint tri that I'm hopefully going to do in September, again, as a C race. But that's actually been a really nice sort of accountability mechanism for keeping in like the good amount of biking. I'm probably biking like twice a week right now and swimming once or twice a week, something like that. But it's nice to sort of keep that in. And by adding things to your calendar strategically like that again are a C race, I'm still going to do my run workout that week, and maybe I will do a sort of quasi long run the day after, something like that. But having that on the calendar has been really helpful to me. And then something else I'll add to that is it has been challenging for me to prioritize doing like any real interval work on the bike, just because I'm already doing like a hard speed session during the week for running. I'm taking strength really, like there's only so many things that you can do really, really well. But in the last week or two, I have convinced myself to do a minimal amount of intensity on the bike by bringing it back to our favorite Strava segments, because for whatever reason, I cannot be like, I'm going to go ride for 45 minutes and go really hard for 10 minutes unless there is a segment that happens to be about 10 minutes long. And as it pertains, I am in Maine right now for a family vacation this week, and there's a lot of fun segments around. So that has been my new approach, is like, let's get a little bit of biking in, let's get a teeny bit of intensity and otherwise easy rides just by doing a little bit of segment hunting. And that's also something you can do. So again, like think about what you want your ideal plan to look like. And if you know you will struggle to execute on that without some type of external mechanism, such as signing up for a sprint tri and chasing some Strava segments, whatever it is for you, go for that. But that's definitely what's been working for me.
So Katie's going after Slab City, or maybe you already have Slab City.
Well, I will say too, Slab City is a segment around here that I went for back in 2020. I think you and one of our other good friends, very elite cyclist, helped kind of lead me out for that. So I hold that crown from probably 2020. There's no chance I could go for that one, I don't think, without actually doing like a 6-month bike building block and having my TT bike. However, there's a lot of other segments in the area that I'm just taking for myself, like saying, I know that I'm fitter on trails right now than 2020 Katie. Let's go destroy her. Like that's really fun. And this comes back to this idea of chasing PRs too, of like, you don't have to be chasing the CR, the QOM. You could always just be chasing a time that you have. And I think this actually does bring us to, we're going to kind of shift gears for a second, then maybe we'll come back to marathon, is an awesome set of reflections that we got on Strava segments from one of my athletes. This appeared in Training Peaks, and I was like, this is art. Like, since when has anyone ever created art based on Strava segments, and not like the Strava art that people do, which is also very cool of the map, but this is written art. So I'm going to read this reflection and then we can riff a little bit on it. But this athlete said, "Such a nice loop, we wrote it again today. Successful mission of getting the crown. Was reflecting about what's so exciting to me about segments. I think there's something uniquely exciting about Strava segments compared with races. A race gives you a fixed result. Once you cross the finish line, your place is set. You won, came third, finished in a certain time, and that result becomes part of the record. A segment crown is different because it's inherently temporary. You can take the crown today, but you have no idea how long you'll keep it. Maybe it lasts for years, maybe someone takes it tomorrow. There's kind of a suspense that continues even after the effort itself is over. It also means the competition is asynchronous and open ended. You're competing against people who rode the segment yesterday, 5 years ago, or who haven't even ridden it yet. When you take a crown, you haven't really won the segment in a way that you win a race. You're just the current holder. The leaderboard is always alive. That impermanence might actually make the achievement more compelling. A race result becomes history the moment the race ends. A segment crown remains something happening in the present. Every day you hold it adds a tiny bit of value while also carrying the possibility that someone could take it away. And when someone does take it, the competition can start all over again. I was just like,
Yeah.
what? Mind blown. This is a beautiful, beautiful reflection, again, on actually why it is so fun to do something silly and stupid, like go as hard as you can for
Mm.
10 minutes on Slab City Road or whatever segment it is in whatever location. But it is so cool. And I think I'm actually someone who likes to say, like, I got the crown and that's forever. But then to know that you could come back 6 years later and be like, I'm going to take that crown from myself, or I'm going to take it from that other girl that went and got it 3 years ago. And knowing that even if I do that, someone could come tomorrow and take that away. I think that's really, really fun and very cool, and inspired me again to like push for more and more segments this week while I'm up here.
Yeah, this is great. I wish I had something really to kind of add to that, but I was like, I really like, this is everything. The whole, like, I love the past, the present, and the future. I love that part of it. I love how dynamic it is. Competing against yourself, competing against people who haven't even done it yet. Like, it's this is just so cool. But yeah, one thing that I was just reflecting on for myself was like, it's just I love, usually the fall time I'll like go after some segments, and usually it's just PRs because I live in a place with lots of strong cyclists. But I just love that sort of the opportunity. Sometimes I'll be riding along. And all of a sudden be like, oh, I think I kind of have a tailwind and I feel really good. And it just becomes this organic interval. Like, let's say I know I'm on a segment or something or it's coming up. I'm like, I'm just going to kind of go for it right now. I just love that. And maybe I get the PR or maybe I don't. But I love that sort of that moment of like discovery. I mean, it's like this feeling comes across me going, oh my gosh, everything's lining up like right now. I didn't intend to do this at all. Like magic just sort of appears and you're like, go grab it. Let's just go. Let's just go after it. And I love how part of that's just being open to that magic. Some days we're just like, maybe I was doing just a regular ride and also I was like, I'll do 2-minute segment here. And this is just awesome. It's just fun. And just that excitement, just being present for the experience is just so cool.
Absolutely. And I like that it's kind of low stakes and that you can plan it basically whenever you want to. Like you can plan around the weather if you want to, or you can just go out on whatever random easy ride and be like, I know I maybe want to hit some intensity at some point and I'm going to do it on this particular segment. And actually, I'll share a quick story. So yesterday I did a big trail run in the morning and then we were going to go to dinner at some relative's house like 10 miles away. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll hop on my bike and I will ride to dinner because that's just an efficient way of using the 3 T's, time, tools, terrain, etc. I was like, I have to get there anyway, and Connor can drive with the baby and it'll be all great. So anyway, I planned to ride over there and again, had a whole week of training and 2 hours of trail miles in my legs. So I was not feeling particularly fresh. But then I was like, oh, I know that there's a segment on the way that I could just try for. And I'd ridden it the day before and realized that without really trying, I was in the top 10.
Mm.
And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I could just get it. I'm going to try and get the crown. So I went out. I pushed pretty hard, like maybe a 90% effort there. And I missed the crown by a couple seconds on 3 different segments. And I was kind of surprised. And I sort of got my ass handed to me in that particular situation. But I realized, well, the context was there was a really big headwind. And the day before, there'd been a tailwind. So it felt really easy with the tailwind the day before. That day, it felt like more of a headwind. But I think all of this is relevant because I have to tell you, the fire is so lit for me to go back and try this again. I jumped on my computer when I got home. I looked at the weather forecast for the entire week. I was like, all right, when are we getting a northwest wind? Because southeast is not going to help me. We are not making that mistake again. And it's just this whole project that I have for the week now is to go back and get that thing. And that means that in the course of doing that, I might get several hard 7-minute efforts on the bike in, however many times it takes me to get there. I also was like, oh, who can I recruit in the area to sort of lead me out? I'm getting very serious about this whole thing. And maybe by the time the podcast airs, I will have it. I hope so. I am manifesting that. But again, it's so exciting and it's so alive and it's something that you can just sort of do on your own. So think about that as ways to insert joy. I feel like we're just rehashing a segment we've already talked about, but I feel like this is so fun that everyone has to give it a try. At some point, motivation to go hard when you otherwise wouldn't is really, really valuable. And it's okay to admit that we all need a little bit of external motivation.
Yeah, I think so. I think like, just watching us both talk about this and smile and laugh about it. And, is the point to win your race or to, come in 1 minute, faster on your marathon or whatever your triathlon, or is it to like feel alive? And I think that feeling like if you said to me, hey, you can be fit or you can feel alive, like I'd probably take feeling alive as the ultimate, like way over almost everything else, right? Isn't that the point of living? And I feel like, so there are these times like this, this weird little Strava social media segment thing somehow just lights us up inside, and it really makes me feel alive, and it's really super exciting. So when you find those things, follow them, right? Because they're saying something. Maybe you can't put. Justine put words around these, and she really described it. I'm not that eloquent, I could not, but she really captured the magic of it, like the feeling alive of going after this thing. And so I don't know. I want to do more of that. I want to find those things and just sort of follow that thread.
Today's title is just triathlon feeling alive or something like that.
Staying alive, staying alive.
Perfect. Actually, with that, I'm going to take us in a little segue to feeling not so alive. You have a study here, and we're going to move it back to this marathon training thing on hitting the wall in marathon running. And anyone who has hit the wall before knows that you feel like you're dead if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some new research on sort of what is actually happening physiologically. I think this is also relevant because we could think about sort of building plans that help us avoid hitting the wall in the same sense that we see so often. So what is actually happening when someone hits the wall in a marathon or a really long race?
Well, they're running a marathon. That's the first problem. But, so yeah, this is a review study, and I think none of this is groundbreaking, but it was interesting. It was just a way of sort of summarizing it. So what are the big things that we're trying to train and we're trying to be aware of? Because there are some really big challenges with a marathon. And again, very similar to like long course stuff. But okay, so what's sort of happening? What are people sort of experiencing? They're experiencing glycogen depletion. And again, we've been talking a lot about that. Fueling, getting up to your, whatever it is, your 80 or 100 grams of carbs, maybe more. But we've a lot of folks on that. So I think we sort of checked. We've been dealing with that a lot. Gut problems are something that comes up. And again, that can be often related to fueling, but maybe other things that go on. You're running a marathon, you get hot, the blood gets diverted away from your digestive system to cool you down. So lots of problems there. Obviously, we talk about this all the time. Heat and hydration, your heart rate goes up, your perceived exertion goes up, and you just get hot inside. Like you can't run very fast in the heat and humidity. And then you also have like, neuromuscular fatigue and biomechanical breakdown. I think that's a really, really big one. And Katie, I want to sort of circle back to that in terms of the strength work. And then sort of last one here is just pacing errors, going out too hard or not having an appropriate baseline of like, say, yeah, this is my goal. I'm going to go and run, 8-minute pace for my marathon, when in fact, really you're an 8:20 person, right? And again, we sort of talked about that. Originally, I was like, how do we determine, the correct pacing early on so when you show up, you're not doing these pacing errors. But there's also just like, how do you hold back a little bit in marathon? So anyway, there's a lot there. Katie, where do you want to take that?
I mean, all of this, I think, speaks to a lot of the things that we're trying to signal out as coaches, working with our athletes, what we want to be training, what we want to be avoiding, practicing our nutrition strategy, our hydration strategy in every single long run, things like that, thinking about effective ways to cool. I do want to double click a little bit on the strength training.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because I feel like my perspective on strength training is basically just my perspective as an athlete, which I have started taking strength training probably more seriously for probably like 2.5 years now. Before it was kind of just like an afterthought of whatever. I just got that stuff in, or I was doing like PT to rehab a particular injury, but not heavy weighted strength. And since I started taking this really, really seriously in, I don't know, probably beginning of 2024, I have just felt like a faster, fitter, more durable athlete across the board. And that's really all I can say about it, other than any athlete who does incorporate strength training seems to get injured a lot less, seems to be really fast and really powerful and really fit. These things are not necessarily at odds. And it does take some time to learn, but there are so many resources out there. So, I mean, of course, the most expensive of those, which does often get really good results, is to work with a strength trainer. However, you don't have to work with a strength trainer forever. Like working with someone for a couple sessions just to learn sort of these basic kind of compound movements, how to be comfortable in the gym, and then taking it on your own. That's helpful. There's a lot of really great video programs. So a lot of my athletes use ladder strength. You can find a coach that you like. They have very good sort of guided, heavy weighted strength stuff. There are online programs you can also buy, but anything is better than nothing. And it should be heavy, and it should include different lateral movements and core stability and all of that. So I just can't sing the praises of strength highly enough, even if you are training for something like a marathon. And actually, a question I often get on that is like, how do you periodize your strength training around say a marathon build. I feel like we've maybe addressed that in a couple podcasts before, but often you want to make your strength training peak maybe like 6 to 8 weeks out from your goal race. And then you're tapering that down as your mileage is coming up for the longest run. So there's a way to sort of toggle those things, but strength should really always be there in some capacity. It's only in the week or two leading up to a race that you're going to dial that down. And the off season is also a really great time to keep that going. So strength is always great. Think about it a lot. If you have questions, reach out. We are not strength coaches, but we can help kind of direct you to good strength resources. And any athlete that I have spoken to who has started incorporating more heavyweighted strength is always so happy that they did and they are seeing the results, not even just for injury prevention, but also for speed, power, durability, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Another place to start too is if you have a local physical therapist, one who's, into sports and is aware of, go to them and, because a lot of times we have these imbalances and they can start you off by saying, okay, well, here's where you're at. We need to work on, this, and this, just to keep you maybe sort of injury free. And then from there, that once you build that up and you sort of address those issues, that sort of naturally leads into like, okay, I'm going to continue this program and maybe I'm going to progress it and sort of just be more general strength as well too. So yeah. And we also have these local muscular endurance ones. There's all kinds of ways to get there. There's no shortage of information out there, but it is really nice to start with, a strength trainer or some sort of PT. Somebody who can, you can work with a couple times and be like, hey, this is, where am I at? Just like we're saying here is like, we all need a context. We all need somebody to sort of bounce things off from to get us started or to maybe to even just keep us on track. And I think that's what, a good PT, a good strength coach, just a general coach just does.
Absolutely. And maybe this is a good segue to something that's been sitting in our outline for like 4 weeks now. But we're always talking about Norwegian training, another buzzword for the podcast episode. And there's been some new sort of insight on how Norwegian training incorporates different type of strength, speed, power, durability, stuff like that. So why don't you just real quick hit that insight related to how the Norwegians approach strength training?
Well, I think we just covered it, Katie, which was like strength is super important, right? And I think what's a cool thing, the reason why I put this study in here actually was because people hear Norwegian and they go, oh my God, what am I not doing? What are the Norwegians doing? And so I saw this study and I was like, oh, this is what most people are already doing. Like they're doing some level of strength training. They're periodizing exactly, Katie, what you just said was like, there's a period of time we should be going heavier and then you should be going lighter. And, is strength important? Of course it's important. It's the foundation for lots of things. So again, they were talking about strength as foundation, periodizing it. The strength prescription is basically kind of what most people are probably doing. Typical sessions, 4 to 8 exercises, 2 to 4 sets per exercise, 5 to 10 reps. That sounds about right, what most people are doing right now. So really it's supportive. It's not central, but it is a really foundational thing. So anyway, you can walk around your gym and say, hey, I'm doing Norwegian training if basically you're just kind of doing, a regular strength routine.
I love that. Good to know and very validating for people who are already incorporating that strength training. So shout out to strength training. Again, useful at really every stage of life, especially for kind of masters athletes. I found it very, very useful for kind of like surviving pregnancy and then return to sport in a way that has kept me injury free. So really, really, really important there. We're going to do a little wordplay with this next segue on strength in general. You have an insight, Jim, on finishing your season strong. And maybe from that, we will move into challenge and gear pick of the week. But as we were heading into these final triathlon races of the year and sort of run season, but not for everyone, we do want to think about finishing strong. So maybe hit that one real quick.
Yeah, so strong in a different sense. So yeah, it is interesting having these conversations about either about marathon or some of the last triathlon races. And what I often say to folks is I want to finish strong. And end of the day, I realized like I've been saying this finishing strong quite a bit to athletes. And I thought, okay, what is that? What do I mean when I say, finishing the season strong? And I think for me, and what I've been trying to explain to athletes is this sort of this feeling of like you're being dialed into race week, 1 to 2 days leading into the race, smart pre-race morning fuel, prepping, hydration, just having a good sense of solid swim, bike, and run pacing and fueling for the day. So I think a good indicator of, a strong finish obviously is always like a negative run split, so basically you're running the back half faster than the first half. But again, I think what I really want to end the season on is like sort of bringing it all together, right? Like everything I've been working on, all these skills I've been working on, and really just being very mindful that the brain sort of consolidates around sort of the last thing that you did. And I want folks to go into, whether they're doing a run race as the last thing of the year or a triathlon, I want them to go into the fall and the winter going like, yeah, I kind of brought everything to kind of together, on this last run. I applied everything. I applied my fitness. I applied all my knowledge, all my skills. Maybe it wasn't even your fastest time, but like it just felt good. I felt like I kind of brought it all together. It's this mental momentum that we can carry heading into the next season. And I think it sort of gets people fired up. And when people finish strong, whether that's an individual race or a season, it's much easier for coach and athlete to look back on the whole season, on the whole arc, and say, okay, this is what we did right. This is the places that we maybe want to go next year to improve, as opposed to when you finish like a race week, and I have this conversation, sometimes, and people are like, I'm lost now. Like I had a terrible race. Things did not go well. Did any of this training mean anything? It's human nature. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. But when you finish strong, you can go, oh yeah, here's the 5 things that I really learned this year and really nailed. And then maybe here's 3 things that'll bring me to the next level next year. So again, just sort of like thinking about like just taking a little bit more care in these last, not to put extra pressure on, but it just sort of like say, how do I just show up at these last few events, apply everything that I know, just be really smart and mindful in this race so that I can, reflect and go into next season, just, super psyched with a better plan.
Yeah, and it's nice because a lot of these things are not dictated by a particular race outcome. It's sort of just like process goals that you want to bring into any race experience. And even if the outcome is not necessarily what you wanted, at least you could stand by, I executed my race plan perfectly. It comes back to the importance of having a race plan and talking through that race plan with your coach and knowing that there are things that could go sideways, but hopefully they are uncontrollables rather than controllables. I think we can then walk out of any race outcome and say, I'm excited for next season, which is the goal. Like you need your off season, you need your time to sort of think about it, but you don't want to have a sour look on the whole season because of that. So I love that goal. I think that's a great place for us to sort of channel our energy in these final triathlon races. And then this applies too to there are people who are doing their fall marathon, starting in early October. That's going to be here before we know it, or like a month out from that. And that's where we can also be looking back on like, was this a good build? Are we happy with how we executed? So lots of training to do to get there. But for our triathletes who are going to be wrapping up very soon, we're excited for you. You've put in all the work. We are cheering for you. I'm excited to do my sprint in a couple of weeks as my C race. So we'll definitely have some insights from that as well as from continued run training. But I think from now, let's transition into our challenge of the week or our resource of the week. Jim, what is your challenge or resource of the week?
My challenge of the week is, it's interesting. I just saw this workout come up and I wanted to flag it because we often use this podcast notes just to flag things I find interesting. But I saw this workout. It seems like a really fun and efficient workout for the treadmill, which would just be, you go for 30 minutes at 3 miles an hour. And then what you do is you set the incline based upon sort of, what you can do. Maybe it's an 8% incline at first, and that you can maintain that 3 miles per hour. Maybe it's 12%, whatever it is, but you can sort of play around with it or you can progress it. But I just thought, I want to flag this because I think this is just a fun, maybe you're stuck in a hotel like this winter and you're like, I don't really want to go running outside and do this and that, but like, let me jump on the treadmill, throw it on an incline. Let me see if I can hold a certain speed for like, say 30 minutes. And that's just a great power, workout. And I think it just would really check the box as being very efficient and also maybe kind of fun.
Yeah, and this actually speaks to a lot of principles we've already talked about today. One of those is this is really effective cross training for run training. So you could do that as your cross training. This was a workout that I did all the time actually in very late pregnancy when I couldn't do that much else, but it's something you could flex in when running maybe isn't working for you for whatever reason. Found it to be useful for pregnancy as well. And I think this is also a pretty nice sort of volume addition that doesn't add impact. If you ever want to play around with like doubling or something like that, this would be a really, really great place to start. And I love how efficient it is. My challenge of the week is sort of related to this efficiency. I'm going to suggest finding time to add in sort of one exercise snack type workout with those 3 T's principles we talked about. What time do I have? What terrain do I have? What tools do I have? I actually did that yesterday, just talking about that bike ride where I biked to dinner because I knew we needed to get there and it was going to take 20 minutes to drive or 50 minutes to ride. And I was like, I can probably do that. I can figure out how to make that work, but being really efficient about what time you have to do those things, I think can be helpful. Commutes are really, really fun for getting in movement. So look at your entire week and be like, where could I potentially get in something that's just 20 to 30 minutes long? Because over time, those things do really, really add up.
They really add up. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, gear pick of the week. What you got?
Oh, I'm so excited. I actually have a new gear pick of the week. I have new trail shoes. So I'm going to recommend the S-Lab Genesis. These I learned are actually the shoes that Courtney Dauwalter won the 2023 Western States Hard Rock and UTMB in. So they certainly worked for her
Yeah.
for these long distances. What's interesting is the ones that I linked, I think I linked the version 2, which just came out hot off the press this last week. I don't have the version 2. I have the original version. And the devastating thing is that version 2 are super ugly, like bad colors. They're black and red, and I just don't like them very much. So I have the original version. But my hope is that either you don't care so much about the colors or that they come out with more colors soon because people complain. So everyone should write to Solomon and be like, these are such great shoes. Please make them in better colors. But I am absolutely loving them on trails. They're light, they're springy, they're amazingly grippy. And I've been out on some really great trail runs with them recently and it felt super awesome. So catch me getting crowns in these shoes. It is all the shoes, maybe a little bit of the fitness and the experience, but mostly the shoes, and have really, really been loving them.
I thought it was the Courtney Dauwalter shorts that you were wearing.
I mean, honestly, maybe that's actually the answer. Maybe I will undeniably get every crown if I can do the shorts and the shoes combo.
Yes.
But so far, the shoes are working pretty well for me.
My gear pick of the week. These carbon water bottles. They're actually quite economical. I've probably done this before, but they're on all of my bikes. And yeah, they're really, really inexpensive. And actually, just randomly broke two of them. Just broke recently. Like they've been so hardy. Like these things have lasted for almost forever. And then in the last week, 2 have broken. I'm like, okay, that's just wild. Like one hasn't broken in like maybe a decade or something. So anyway, I just ordered them. I thought I'd put it out there because they're sleek and light and quite economical.
I love that like the impetus was like 2 of these broke this week, but you should really get them. But
Exactly.
I agree. No, they are really good. I have these as well. And again, they probably make like fancy brands where they're going to charge some crazy amount. And then you can get like the made in China brands that are like
Yep.
$8 or something.
Right,
So
exactly.
agreed. They are really good. Super, super light. And if you are going for KOMs, you probably need your bike to be as light as possible. So get sleek with these carbon water bottle cages. Love it.
No, that's exactly right. But it's probably why I put it because they're, you can buy, I don't know if it's Gorilla cages or some of these cages, and you're like, they're like $50 for a carbon. And you're like, you look at it and like, okay, well, it's kind of the same thing that I got from these guys. So at first, when I bought these many, many years ago, I thought, this is not going to work. It can't possibly be, this is cheap and it's going to work. And it just turns out like, oh yeah, this was a find. And every time I go back to Amazon to order some more, if I get a new bike or something, I think, oh, they're not going to be there. They're going to like, this is too good of a deal. These work too well. This is too good to be true. And they're still there. So
There are no shortcuts, but this is a shortcut. So
yes,
there you go.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to us opine on Strava segments yet again, as well as many other insights related to marathons and things in between. If you are new to the podcast, please consider sharing it with someone who might enjoy these topics, or you can like it, comment on it. You can click follow, also very useful for us. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, peeps.